seen probably to the borders of Iraq. I mean, that's what he said. And so here I am witnessing something that our Prophet ﷺ predicted with my own eyes. Now, where did that knowledge come from? That's revelation. That's not something, that people just say. It's something that he predicted. Now, obviously, the skeptic can say, well, why aren't things more specific? I mean, why didn't Jesus tell us that the Normans are going to invade England in 1066 and really make it specific? I mean, a skeptic can say that. On the other hand, faith, to me, there's an element of faith always that Kierkegaard called it a leap of faith, that there's a type of jump. But I think it's really about, in the presence of this overwhelming evidence, there'll always be some skeptical undertones there, always. And whether you choose to listen to those or whether you choose to really accept the overwhelming evidence, that's for me is the real choice. And what skeptics do is they end up focusing on those undertones to such a degree that they're blinded by the overwhelming evidence. And that's one of the things that the Quran says is that, جَحَدُوا بِهَا وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُمْ, they denied it even though their real soul was aware of its truth. So that's kufr in Arabic means to cover up. That's what we tend to forget that. The kufr is, kafara means to cover over something. That's why in Arabic the farmer is called kafir. أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَارَ نَبَاتُهُ. In the Quran, kufar is also used as farmers. The farmers were amazed by their flora. So we tend to forget that kufr is covering up the truth.
It's you've touched on so many subjects there. One of them particularly I can attest to, you mentioned in the modern age, people are confused, are confronted with so many challenges. As a student at university, which wasn't so long ago, I remember picking up a copy of the Creed of Imam Al Tahawi, reading it, and I remember a young brother coming to me and telling me that, a creed is something that could not be learned in a day. You have to actually go and study for many years. And he told me to put the creed away. You've now published this book. I mean, how would you respond to somebody saying this is something that it requires a great degree of sophistication?
Well, on the one hand, creed can be learned in a few minutes, because a person becomes Muslim in a moment. They just have to say La ilaha illallah. You can understand that at a very basic level. My own teacher, Murad Hajj, said that if somebody understands ikhlas, really understands it, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ صَمَدْ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدْ, say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ, say God is unique, God is samad, independent, He does not give birth, nor was He born, and there's nothing like God, no thing is like God. That once you understand that, he said that if you really understood that surah, you had enough creed. So, on the other hand, learning creed is considered a fard ayn, that the Muslims said, something like Imam Al Tahawi's book, that does take some time. I mean, I think you could do it in a reasonably short time, at a basic level. To get into serious theology, I mean, that becomes a lifelong study.
But this is what from reading the book, this is not what the book is about. It's trying to avoid the disputations, trying to get to the core.
Well, that's what Sheikh Hamza Yusuf wrote an introduction, and in the introduction, I mean, what he says, I think, is quite useful, because in the introduction, he says that there's two paths for the Muslims. One of them, he says that any believer who wishes to deepen his or her knowledge in this religion should follow two courses. The first is to occupy oneself with those matters of faith that concern the heart and its states, as well as purification of the ego, tazkiyah, enabling one to ascend to the degree of spiritual excellence, ihsan. The second involves a course of study of practical jurisprudence, fiqh, in order to acquire the divine injunctions and rectify one's transactions and contracts. That historically, creed was something Muslims did not like to put that immense focus on. Creed was something that you learned, and faith was something that you developed. Because faith, وَرُجِّحَتْ زِيَادَةُ الْإِيمَانِ بِمَا تَزِيدُ طَاعَةُ الْإِنسَانِ. That the preferred opinion is that faith increases with good acts. So the important thing is not to increase your creed, but to increase your faith. Because anybody can learn this. an atheist can learn Islamic creed. They can become a master of Islamic creed. They can teach Islamic creed in the universities. There are Orientalists who know creed better than a lot of Muslim ulama, I guarantee you. So that is not what Islam is about. It's not about these doctrinal, dogmatic formulas that you learn and can by rote like a parrot. That's not to say that it's not important to know those, to protect you from deviant beliefs and to protect your creed and to know exactly what it is I believe. But at the same time, faith is something else. It's something that happens in the heart, which is why I opened this book with a quote by Imam Al saying that faith is not a set of formulas. It's a light that God puts in the heart. And so that is at the essence of what our religion is about, is how we nurture our iman, tanmiyatul iman. And that is done through good deeds. It's done through acts. It's done through ta'ah with Allah. It's done through fasting. It's done through recitation of Quran. If you recite Quran, your faith will increase. If you study the Quran, your faith will increase. I mean, these are guaranteed things. People don't do these things. They don't try these things. If you give charity, your faith will increase. If you do those with the proper niyyah, with the proper intention, your faith will increase. And so that is where Muslims should be engaged, in purifying themselves and in learning these injunctions. You know, the taqwa, I mean, the essence of Islam is taqwa. That's the essence of Islam. If you really want to understand what Islam is about, it's about piety. It's about a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which is direct and immediate.
So in other words, learn your creed, 130 statements, very, very short, very sharp.
Right.
Move on, do good works, increase your iman, and compete with one another with good works. Basically, this is what
vying with one another in good works. I mean, that's what the Quran says. Vying one another. You know, people are always criticizing Christians and Jews and Muslims. A lot of Muslims do that. Spend their time, you know, the Christians and the kuffar and this and that. And the Quran says, vie in good deeds. Don't say I'm better than them. Don't make any claims. Just do your work. Do what you're supposed to be doing, and they'll see for themselves. They'll see. But if your community is corrupt, if your community is dysfunctional, if your community has domestic violence, if it has abuse of women, if it has oppression, all those things, how can you call other people to virtue if you're not practicing? You know, the Quran says, do you call people to righteousness and you forget yourselves? I mean, that's a pretty clear Quranic statement. How can you call others to virtue when you're not a virtuous community? There's a lot of good in the Muslim community. I mean, there's a lot of good in our community. There's a lot of good here in England. I mean, some of the Muslim people here, they're very decent people. They're good people, but they need their decency needs to become something that is emblematic of the community.
It should be manifested as well. I mean, you bring it out, take it from your houses, bring it to the streets, your neighbors.
People really need to be aware of that. And there's a lot, the English people, there's a lot of good people in this country. But some of these people, they're very frightened. They're worried about the Muslim community. They're being told a lot of distorted things about our community, and it's important for Muslims to offset a lot of that. Unfortunately, there are some ignorant people in this country as well, not just from the Muslims, but from other peoples. And you have some racists in this country. Racism has been a major problem. It's a human problem. It's a perennial problem. It's been a problem in this country for a long time. There are people... institutionally, they have been trying to deal with this problem. I think there's a real recognition. Most people recognize philosophically that racism is wrong, but we have yet to really internalize that truth in ourselves. But institutionally, there are a lot of people here that have really tried to combat racism in the culture, and that's important. But I also think it's very important that Muslims not fall into the trap of seeing that a lot of the attacks right now against Islam are racist attacks. I think there's an element here that's far more about religion, and religious persecution is medieval in the minds of most Western people.